You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host for Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado. Today, we have a conversation with Congressman-elect Jeff Crank. He recently won the seat in the 5th Congressional District for the United States House of Representatives. He was born in Pueblo and earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Colorado State University. His career in politics began as a congressional staffer for Representative Joel Heffley from 1991 to 1998, where he rose to the position of administrative director. He ran for the same seat that he just won in 2006 and 2008, and we discussed this. He has a long history as a Colorado conservative, and he is known for hosting a talk radio show on KVOR AM in Colorado Springs for 14 years. He also served as vice president of the Colorado Springs Chamber of Commerce and later became the state director for Americans for Prosperity. And he is also known most recently for hosting the American Potential podcast. He lives in Colorado Springs with his wife and 2 children, and we are delighted to have him join us today.
Hello, Rockies. We are joined by Congressman-elect Jeff Crank. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, and congratulations are in order.
Yeah, it is just such an honor. I mean, it's just so amazing. I've told folks out of all of the hundreds of millions of people who've been able to call themselves Americans, only just over 11,000 people have gotten to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, which, I mean, there's more people who've played in the NFL than have served in the House of Representatives or in the NHL over the years. And so it's a high honor. I'm totally undeserving of it. I mean, I'm just a normal guy who was born and raised in Pueblo, Colorado, to a middle class family. But that speaks to the greatness of America, right? If I can do it, anybody can do it. If they aspire to do that, and people do far greater things than serve in Congress, and we see it every day in America.
Yeah, well, and this isn't, I certainly want to focus forward on what's going to happen, but 18 years ago, you ran and lost, unfortunately, this seat. So tell me about that.
Well, and you say unfortunately, but I got to tell you, looking back on it, I think it was very fortunate that all turned out that way. And I mean, it's hard to say that when you lose a race. Nobody likes to lose a race. And I've got a great comparison for you on that as well. But yeah, I ran 18 years ago, back in 2006. I lost that race by 892 votes in a 6-way primary, a 6-way Republican primary. I lost to Doug Lamborn, who is the current sitting congressman here. And, that was a difficult loss. I actually ran again in 2008 and lost in a 3-way race there. I moved on and I did other things. And I will tell you, I stayed in the fight because the fight for me is the fight for liberty and freedom. And, we have a country to save. We have liberty and freedom to defend in America. And I've got to pass that on to my children and grandchildren. And that's ultimately what drives me, right? Is that we live in the greatest country on the face of the earth. There's not any doubt about that. Here in America, you can do what you want to do, but we've got to preserve that. And if we're not here ready to defend it, then we're going to lose it. So I found other ways to be involved. I went out and built a business, built a building or a company that did renovations of homes and things like that. Held a lot of those and kind of built some real estate holdings and things like that. And then I founded the Colorado chapter of Americans for Prosperity. I went out and started radio. I did talk radio and did that for 14 years. I was on the radio here in Colorado Springs. And so all of those things were ways, particularly the radio stuff, was a way for me to, and Americans for Prosperity, were ways for me to stay in the fight and to still contribute. And to me, that's a great part of the story is, you can sulk and you can go home and say, well, I lost, but that's what happens to people when it's about you as a person. And I got to say, there were times that I struggled with that. We all have egos and, nobody likes to lose. But ultimately, I stayed in a fight because I cared about those things. And 18 years later, I get a call from my congressman, Doug Lamborn, the man who 18 years prior beat me. And we, at the time, I mean, he and I we laugh about it now, but I don't think we cared for each other very much. I mean,
Can't imagine such a thing.
no, we were definitely opponents, and it was a tough primary. It was a tough battle. But the lesson of that story is that hopefully personalities and yourself get put in second place, and you focus on the things that matter. And many times over the years, I had Doug Lamborn, invited him on my show. He called and asked if he could come on. Always let him on, and he and I built that friendship and relationship, and I think just respect. And so he calls me one day about a year ago, maybe, I don't know, December 20th or something of last year. And he said, I just want to see if you want to get together for breakfast or lunch. And so we went to breakfast and lunch, and he just said, hey, I just don't know if, I haven't decided if I'm going to run again or not. But if I don't, just wanted to see if you'd do it. And if you're going to, I'd be supportive. Well, my reaction was, man, I don't think there's any way I want to run for Congress. This is dumb. I mean, why would I do this? I have a great life. I started the podcast for Americans for Prosperity. We've done 250 episodes. We have, I think, somewhere around 59 million video views and downloads and things over the last 2 years. And I have a great life. I record podcasts, and, I travel kind of when I want. Why would I want to do this? But I went home and I told Doug at the time, I said, look, I'll talk to my wife and my family about it. I'll pray about it and just kind of see where I'm guided. And I started doing that. And it became obvious to me that, look, if good people don't step up and run, bad people will. This is just like the world stage. If America steps back, bad actors step in, right? If America steps back and says, we're not going to lead anymore, China or Iran or Russia or somebody will step in and fill that void. And so if we want good people, then you got to be willing to step up, and you got to be willing to serve and sacrifice and those things. So after really a lot of prayer and a lot of discussions with my family, we decided to get in the race, ran the primary, won the general. And so it's a great story. I know I've taken way too long to answer
No, that's
this
fine.
question, but it's a podcast, right? So
yeah, well, totally. And that is the question. Oftentimes people say that they want to get involved, but they don't necessarily want to run. What would you say to them?
Find the way that you can give your talents to the cause. Find what you love. It's like anything. It's what I tell my kids. Like, if you want to be successful in life, find the thing you love to do, and just be good. Go do it and be good at it. Like, if you go out and do what you like doing, I mean, you're going to have a great time. At the end of it, you're going to say, you know what? I never worked a day in my life, but I had fun and I made a difference. And I was thinking of that today. I gave a speech earlier today. I really enjoy communication and talking with folks and interacting with them. I told somebody today, my campaign manager always hated this, back particularly in 2006. I'd like to go, Democrat Party would ask me to come speak to them. And I'd always like to go do that, because I like walking into a room knowing that pretty much everybody there thinks this guy's a jerk, whatever. And by the time I leave, I like the challenge of them going, well, you know what? I may not agree with everything he says, but he's a good person. I mean, he's trying to make a difference. And I think that's where we've got to get back to. I'll tell you a quick story about the timing, though, of politics. I was thinking of this just the other day, and it really struck me. I watched a documentary on Ronald Reagan. And it really struck me. Ronald Reagan was kind of my political hero, right? I grew up in the Cold War and saw the Berlin Wall fall and all those things. And I was watching this documentary, and Ronald Reagan, of course, ran for president in 1976 against Gerald Ford. Prior to that, in 1974, he had never been to, it was either 72 or 74. He'd never been to Europe. And Richard Allen, who was his national security advisor and who I've met and interviewed, told him, he said, Governor Reagan, if you want to run for president, you need to go to the Berlin Wall. You need to see it, because that's where East meets West. So Reagan took him up on it. And Richard Allen and his wife and Ron and Nancy Reagan they all flew to the Berlin Wall. They're standing 1970, mid 1970s is when this happened. They're standing at the Berlin Wall. Richard Allen tells me the story that Ronald Reagan reaches out and he sort of touches the wall with his hand. And then he looks back at Richard Allen and he goes, "Dick, we got to tear this thing down." Now, you think of that. So he runs in 1976 and gets beat by Gerald Ford. And he lost at the Republican convention. Over 2,000 delegates voted. Ronald Reagan lost by 50 delegates. That's how close it was. If 50 people, 25, really 26, would have switched their vote and voted for Reagan, he would have won in 76. And what would have happened? He would have served in 76. He would have probably gotten reelected in 1980 and served to 1984. But what happened in 1985 and 86 is Mikhail Gorbachev came along, right? And so, I'm sure Ronald Reagan was very disappointed that he lost that race in 1976. He was probably crushed by it. But I just look at it this way. It wasn't God's timing. God had a different time for Ronald Reagan to serve in office. And so, for him to come in 80 and then get reelected in 84 and go have the ability to meet with Mikhail Gorbachev at Reykjavik and all of those things, and then go have the courage to stand at the Berlin Wall and say, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." I mean, that speaks to the timing of things and how they work. I mean, you can talk about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln ran and lost several times, then became the president that preserved the Union. So, I look at it as God has timing. I'm not certainly not saying God, chose me to win this time or whatever, but he knows. I mean, God knows when I will win and when I will lose. He knew when Ronald Reagan would win and lose, and it's all part of the plan. And so I don't worry about the timing of it. I'm not in control of all of that.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
You didn't try to get a different office. I mean, essentially it is the same exact race.
Sure.
So you didn't look for anything else. You stepped outside of politics for a while.
I did. Yeah, I did. And I, the radio and communications really came about probably before I ran for Congress. I started guest hosting radio, and that's just something that, I enjoyed doing and sort of got. The first time I did it, I was terrible. The second time I did it, I was terrible. I don't know why they kept asking me back, but they did. And I got better. It's one of those things, as you know, that the more you do it, this kind of the better you get at it. And so I did that. And then in 2008, after I lost, the day literally after I lost, the radio station that I had done some work for came to me and said, "We'd love to have you on the, come do a show here." And so I signed a contract with them. And for 14 years, I was on the air there, kind of doing that. And that's just, I was perfectly content doing it that way. Now, there's a lot of people who would say, "Well, I lost, so I'm going to go run for some other office or whatever." Honestly, I'd really gotten that out of my system. And I think it's kind of cool because I think back, I don't know when I ran in 06 or 08, how much of it was about me, how much of it was my ego. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, was it ego to run? Was it ego to run? Well, it's certainly not that now. I mean, to me, that was long since beat out of me. I mean, to me, this is service, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. There's going to be times where I will think back of, why did I do this? I had such a good life. But again, it's an honor. This is the greatest nation on the planet, and we all have a part to play in saving it. And I'm just blessed for the part that God's given me.
So you are headed to Washington.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we find that leaders have visions on this side of it and then go off to Washington and maybe don't accomplish a lot, and obviously we have a view as the people, not necessarily knowing some of the deals that need to be made or, difficult discussions that are had amongst colleagues there. But what is your biggest goal in terms of heading to Washington?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same things that President Trump was elected on, because I campaigned on those very same ideas of, first of all, fixing the broken economy. Our economy is broken, inflation is rampant, and we've got to fix that for the American people. And I think the way you do that is it's simple. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Um, we spend too much money, and that's what causes inflation. I love to watch other people say, well, Amazon increases prices, or this company's evil, or whatever. Give me a break. I mean, there's one entity in America that can print money. It's not the state of Colorado. It's not Amazon, although it seems like they print money maybe sometimes the way they make it, but or the packages that show up on my door. But in reality, it's the U.S. Treasury. It's the federal government can decide how much money goes into our economy. And as long as they're putting too much money into the economy, chasing too few goods, that is what causes inflation. So we've got to cut back on spending. And that's going to be a very difficult task. We're almost $36 trillion now in debt. And they're not going to be easy decisions. Look, it'd be easy if I was one person and I got elected to go there and solve it. Or if Donald Trump was the one person who got to go there and say, nope, I'm going to fix it and balance the budget. That's not the way our system works. It's not the way our founders set it up. I've just gotten elected to a job where I have to go and I have one vote. And in order to do anything, I have to convince 217 other colleagues that what I'm doing is right. And then even once we do that, it's got to be passed by the U.S. Senate and then signed by the president. So it's a very difficult challenge. I am heartened to know that it does seem like there's teamwork. Right now, there's an effort on the part of Republicans to say, look, we have this moment. We can't bicker. We can't fight over small details. We got to get the big things done. And so I might have to cast some votes that I wouldn't otherwise cast in order to get that done. But we've got to keep that in mind. It's going to be hard to hold together. Hopefully the president can hold that together. The leadership in the Congress can hold it together, and we can get some great things done. Second thing is the border. I mean, the president ran on this, and I think the American people resoundingly said, we are tired of just an open border and letting people come through. We have to be a nation of laws. We're all for immigration. My mother's grandparents immigrated here from Italy through Ellis Island. I'm for immigration, but I'm for legal immigration and the rule of law. And so
How do you
getting
feel
back
about
to a system.
the Denver mayor's comments? That was actually in our week in review.
Yeah,
He's caught quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, it did. And it's not helpful. And by the way, he doesn't have the authority to do that. I mean, immigration, immigration issues are under the federal purview. And it's pretty clear that you can't impede federal immigration enforcement. I think, and this is where you get into this rule of law discussion, right? Right now, if a bank gets robbed, the FBI comes in and investigates the bank robbery because it's interstate commerce, and that's what they do. What would happen to our system, and what would happen in the city of Denver and to Mike Johnson, the mayor of Denver, if all of a sudden the federal government said, well, forget it. We're mad at the state of Colorado, so we're not going to investigate bank robberies. I mean, pretty soon we live in chaos. Well, isn't the reverse of that true? That all of a sudden we're going to live in chaos as well if we have mayors who just say, well, we're going to meet you with federal troops. I mean, I think he's backed off of that comment. Those were irresponsible comments. They're not helpful. They're not at all helpful. They're not helpful to us in being respectful for law and order. And let's just be honest. We've spent the last many years talking about respecting the results of elections, right? And I'm for that. There's never been a time in the last 4 years where you would hear me say that Biden was illegitimate or that he didn't win or whatever. Okay. So in 2016, we had a lot of people who were saying that Trump was illegitimate. In fact, Hillary Clinton called him an illegitimate president. That strikes at the heart of our system and respecting the integrity of what voters choose. We saw 2020, and we saw the same thing happen on the other side, where some on the Republican side were saying that and questioning that. We just had an election in which Donald Trump won the election and the presidency by over 6 million votes, 6.5 million, 7 million in the popular vote, overwhelmingly won the electoral college. And we're not even a month from that, and we've got people standing up and saying, "Well, I'll meet federal troops." Come on, that's not respecting the will of the voters. The voters of Colorado, I guarantee you, care about immigration because they elected me, they elected Gabe Evans, they elected Jeff Hurd, they elected Lauren Boebert, and look, I mean, they actually stopped a supermajority in the state Senate and got rid of one in the state house. So they care about these issues, and they do this at their own peril. I think people like the mayor of Denver, when he wants to go out and irresponsibly say things like that, the people who get hurt by crime in these neighborhoods are themselves minorities. Look at the Hispanic vote and how it changed in this election and voted for Trump. They're tired of it. They're tired of the chaos, and they're tired of the pandering.
So speaking of elections, another Coloradan that has gotten a lot of attention recently is our Secretary of State with the leaking of the passwords.
Yeah. Well, look, and it's not just the leaking of the passwords. I do think she should resign because I think people have lost faith in her. Let's not forget that her job is to run elections. It's not to be the chief political cheerleader. I know a lot of good county clerks. Chuck Broerman in El Paso County is one of my really good friends. He was our county clerk for years. Steve Schleicher is the county clerk down here now. He's a good friend. But you know what? He didn't make any statements about my race because he understood how impartiality matters when you're running elections. And so I give him great credit. And I think most clerks understand that. We have a Secretary of State in Colorado, in Jenna Griswold, who ran out and did everything she could to get Donald Trump thrown off the ballot in Colorado. That decision alone, which was rejected not by a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court, but unanimous 9-0 decision that said, you have exceeded your constitutional authority in doing this. I don't know why you wouldn't demand a resignation for that alone. I mean, I think she's acted irresponsibly. When you go out and you're a cheerleader for your party, and quite frankly, she's trying to run for governor and use the Secretary of State's office as a platform to run for governor. When you do that, you really forfeit the mantle of being for election integrity, because quite frankly, you had the opportunity to be there and be this impartial person who oversaw elections. And we need that. We need a judge in elections who is impartial, just like a judge in a courtroom, who calls balls and strikes and does things fairly. And I don't think she's been that at all. So yeah, I think she should resign.
Wow. Thank you for your thoughts on that.
Sure.
So finally, as we wrap up here, you do have other colleagues in Colorado being one of the few states that is still considered blue, considering the election and the sweep and the different changes that have occurred.
Right.
So you mentioned quite a few Republican colleagues, but you also have Democratic colleagues, Senator Hickenlooper, to work with. Do you think that your goals align in terms of Colorado, especially looking at, say, oil and gas?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm proud to serve with the people that the people of Colorado elected. And I will just say, first of all, Governor Polis reached out to me, very kindly reached out to me to congratulate me after I won. He actually did. I was going to call him and reach out to him, but he called me the day before, so he beat me to it. I had a great conversation with him. When I was in Washington, D.C. for orientation, I made it a point. I went over and met with Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett separately. I've called or met with every Democrat and Republican in our Colorado delegation, and just told them how much how honored I am again to serve and to work with them for the good of Colorado. And, that's what the voters want. They're tired of, they want us to be principled, but they also want us to go there and do things that are good for our state. And so, we've got a fight on Space Command right now and whether it would leave Colorado or not. And we are united. There isn't one person in our delegation that isn't united in trying to stop that from happening. So we're united on that. We're united on, fighting forest fires and some of the Western lands issues. So when it comes to Colorado, there's a lot that we can do. And I remember when I first was working in Congress, Joel Heffley was my boss. He was a very conservative Republican. He served alongside Pat Schroeder, who was a very liberal Democrat from Denver, but they were great friends. And, they teased each other. They were friends. They worked when it came to keeping Fort Carson off the base closure list. Pat Schroeder was chair of the of one of the subcommittees on Armed Services Committee, and she was great in helping with that. When it came time to try and stop Fitzsimmons from being closed, Heffley was very helpful to her. And they were just friends and they worked together. And that's the way it should be. We don't have to always agree. And I can still have principle and be nice to someone across the aisle and work with them on something. So I look at this. Frederick Douglass once said, I will work with anyone to do good in America. And look, I'm going to work with anybody to advance my principles in Congress. And I look forward to working with my colleagues.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Congressman-elect. We really appreciate your time today, and we'll hope to have you again when we have some more issues to discuss.
Would love to do it, and I really appreciate what you're doing and the great work that you're doing. Call me anytime. Happy to come back.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.